Oh, here comes Roger. All right. So tonight we've got one of the inglorious members of the group, Dr. Taylor, doing a fabulous presentation, I'm sure, on the pontoons. And are these going to be the construction of them, or on the what do you call it, on the cars?
A little bit of everything. And I really think that it's really so interesting to read about, their use, that it probably could be the topic of, another talk or a discussion, in a few weeks or something like that. It's just really, I had no idea, how significant it was for the armies, not just the pontoon bridges, but the boats.
Right.
All right. And so Dave Schneider told me he was going to be watching tonight. So I tried to.
He's coming.
Yeah, I said, there he is. Oh.
Yeah, it took me a little while. I didn't want to. How you guys doing? It's been a little bit.
It is.
Oh, good.
Hey, Charlie, Tom.
Hi, David.
John.
And Dave, this is my nephew, Will Shire. You met him in Chattanooga.
That's right.
At least Chattanooga. But, he's the artist.
I don't know where have you started? I presume you started. It's a couple minutes after time.
No,
Yeah,
no.
we're just Charlie's about
To
to
let
take
you know what I
off.
was planning to do.
Yeah, so since you're on, Dave asked for like 15 minutes on the front end to share something with us. So, and then when he's done, I'll turn it over to Charlie. So, David?
Yeah, I need to be able to run a little PowerPoint here. You give me that option?
You should have that.
Okay, I'm going to try to share that and see if it works here. Okay, you should see a thing said Bella Swanee, right?
Ah,
Do you?
yes. Yes.
Okay, great. I was reading a thread there. Somebody mentioned about this engine, and since I have some really firsthand information about it, it corrects some of the misunderstandings of what's online. I thought I would just enlighten everybody, because I know a lot about this engine, and I learned a lot about this engine, and I have some pictures and things like that because I went out to see it. And it's not what they say it is on in the thing there. They claim, some people claim it's a Danforth Cook product, but it's not. It's actually the last surviving Hinckley, and I'm going to show you how that works. Okay, so basically, my pictures were all taken during a visit in 2011, but I'm going to show you the evidence that proves essentially, at least in my mind, and I had some extensive conversation with Jim Wilkie about this also, and we agree that this is definitely a Hinckley, which is really cool. Now that's the picture you usually see online if you look at it, okay? And it's hard to tell what the hell it is because its boiler has been, is lacking its casing. The domes are missing pieces. Everything is sort of like screwed up. I don't know if you guys all know the story about this, but this was an old engine that was being used in cypress swamps, and it had a breakdown, a final breakdown, and they decided to just push it into the dump, into the water, boom, and that's it. There's no tender. Tender was not either deteriorated completely, or they didn't find it or bother to bring it up or whatever. So all you have is the engine, and this little cypress log carrying car there is just there for show. Currently, it's on display in a restricted area. It belongs to, it's in the Department of Agriculture's thing, and there's a gate guard and all kinds of other stuff. You just can't walk up there, but because I just walked up there and said, hey, call somebody. I want to take some pictures of the engine. They let me do it. It's amazing what you do sometimes. But so this was a visit I had done in 2011. Out down there visiting because my kids had gone to Florida State, which is in Tallahassee. And this gave me the opportunity to, hey, let's take a look at this engine, because there's always time to look at an engine, right? Now, this is the Belle of the Swanee, and basically it was found underwater. It has been painted with this preservative black coating, so as that doesn't rust anymore, but it's pretty pretty fossilized engine. It has a lot of very critical features, though, that we're going to go over real quick. And first and foremost, if you notice, you'll see, and I'll go into this more detail. It's got an outside frame, at least part of the way around. And this engine clearly dates, I would say, sometime around 1850. This is a further shoe, and here you can see the secure facility. This is behind a big chain link fence with barbed wire on the top and a gate guard, but I just talked my way in. And you can see it's actually quite a small engine, which is very typical of 1850. And it's got the non-spread trucks, which also broadcasts how old it is. Here's a closer up, and you can see that the outside frame was cut off right here, and it was pillared at some time, which confuses the appearance of the engine. But one of the things I like to note is that the original rod here for the piston rod is the typical round style piston rod.
Oh, yeah.
Early engines. Okay, so this engine could be anywhere from like 1848 to 1853 is my 5-year swath of time. After that, everybody had spread trucks, everybody had horizontal cylinders, and everybody gone to flat rods. But these round rods are real giveaways as to age also. And this is another view of the area here. Take a note of these wheels because it's going to be important later on, okay, is the nature of the wheels. Okay, notice how wide the spokes are and stuff. They're really strong. This is not a big, heavy engine. Okay, it's a very lightweight engine. But
Quick question, Dave.
yes.
That outside frame, that would have gone all the way.
Yes, it would have gone all the way over. But the evidence, as we're going to see, is that this boiler was replaced at one point or another with a boiler from another manufacturer. To be a Baldwin boiler. Okay, and I do that based on this sand dome particular style was kind of Baldwinish, late 1870s. But you can't really tell for sure because if you notice, there's no longer any sort of sheathing over the boiler.
Right.
Gone. You're just seeing the plates. Okay, same thing with the steam dome. There's no casing around it, so there's no really to tell. This is the closest we've got to any of the original decorative stuff. Okay.
Under the steam dome on the boiler there, is that a bracket that would hold one of the supports for the thing going on the outside, the frame?
Where are you talking about?
Right in front of the cab. Looks like about 2 feet in front of the cab, up higher on the boiler. Yeah, there, yeah, that thing.
That, I think that it was just probably a bracket that held the sheathing in place, because they would have some kind of insulation layer, very often just wood, and then they'd put the Russian iron on top of the wood. So this to hold things on. It's hard to say really because the condition is so iffy about a lot of it. Now the cab, of course, is just an outline of a cab. It has nothing to do with the reality of the engine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that the cab was not original.
Well, that is just, as you can see, it's just a bunch of 2x4s. Okay, it's to symbolize the cab. The wood is obviously was long gone.
Right.
And the style of cab is impossible to say what it was also because it is long gone. This is the back head, which is a very typical early back head. If you notice, there's almost nothing there. Here you can see where the tricocks used to be. Okay, but your throttle still here. You got the basic, a large wood burning
Hatch.
or the hatch or whatever you want to call it. These brown ones, very common that period. And here you got your Johnson bar, okay, for the valve system, but that's it. I mean, there's like nothing else showing.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff missing. There's some piping and stuff like this, which would have been for the safety and the steam gauge and a few other things. But basically, there's nothing, most of this stuff is gone. Now underneath, I took a quick look at the valve gear, and it's basically a Stevenson, but isn't quite a Stevenson. It's like a Stevenson early version. And so it's got a couple of differences here. The way this is set up with the angles and things like that. It reminds me very much of when I was researching the Yona, which had a knockoff of Stevenson done by Rogers. This is probably a knockoff of Stevenson done by Hinckley because they didn't want to pay the royalty. But it isn't quite right for that. So again, this is pointing to an 1850 engine.
Hmm.
Now this, what I thought was the most significant thing I noticed. Now this is your right-hand side cylinder rod here. Okay, there's the cylinder and all that. What is it? It's bent. And not only it's bent in a certain way. I think what happened was the cylinder froze up for one reason or another, probably due to incredibly poor maintenance, and locked up, and the engine rolled forward a little bit, then came to a shuddering halt as this bent. And you see, since this is the old rod and it's not a replacement rod, they probably decided this was the last straw and shoved it into the swamp.
Wow.
So this may have been the key thing that caused the engine to cease to be operated.
Right.
You'd have to replace this or else it wouldn't run. You can't run an engine with a bent valve rod, or a cylinder rod, I should say. And you notice it's round. Okay,
Yeah.
Here's some other evidences. Okay, this is a Danforth lithograph from the early 1850s. It still shows them with an outside frame. Danforth got rid of the outside frame by the Texas, after all, was an 1855-6 production, and it had no outside frame, and it had the spread trucks. This still has the narrow trucks. This still has the outside frame. So this one, although I don't have a date for it, 1852, 53, somewhere around there. But what I want you to look at real closely is the valve box right here. Okay, look at this. Now notice it's sitting there on top of it. It's the whole cylinder and the valve situation is tilted, right? Along with it, it's a solid casting, right? Okay, now down below here, we have the picture of the Amenia, which of course is the sister to the Yona. And this is an 1851 engine. And here you have, once again, outside frame, you've got the tilted cylinder, and you've got the valves. And here it's even more clearly simply sitting on top of the piston. The valves are simply right on the valve box there is right on top of the piston, okay? I want you to just remember that. Now, the front of the engine looks like this. And this helps make my feeling that it's a Baldwin boiler that they slammed on top of this, because the Baldwin boilers in those days only had the rivets pretty much around the end. And then they had like one or two bolts only holding the thing shut, and had the center where they put their plate. Okay, and it'd be a little bracket here, and they'd put the little operating plate. And this, of course, matches up with what is in the other engine. Now, there it is with the bolt around. There's a bolt over here, okay, to keep it shut. And here, of course, is the bracket where they would have the big Baldwin number on it. Okay, so I was not 100% certain of that, but Jim kind of convinced me that this is definitely a Baldwin boiler that they just got from somewhere. But now what I want you to look at is a cylinder, because this makes it a Hinckley. You notice the cylinder is tilted, but the valve box is not. This is straight, okay? There's an angle. See that angle?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's go. Now, if you remember, the other two engines, the Danforth and the Rogers, both of them had this along the angle, right? Now, look at this picture I have of an early Hinckley engine. This picture was taken in 1861, and the description says the old engine. They refer to it as an old engine Ottawa. okay, taken in August of 1861. So by August 1861, this engine was considered old and obsolete. And here you got the unspread trucks. Here you got the outside frame, but there's the valve. And guess what? This is not tilted with the rest of it.
Mm,
And that is why we think it's a Hinckley.
wow.
Because this is the only, I've never seen any other builder do this. Okay. I've seen a lot of them. So that's the conclusion there. It is not a Danforth product. It is a Hinckley Globe, Globe locomotive or Boston locomotive or Hinckley and Jury or whatever. They had 4 or 5 names at different times. So in conclusion, base engine circa 1850, England, Hinckley, perhaps the only one that exists on Earth. The boiler is newer, lightly from a Baldwin, circa 1880. Why 1880? Because of the sand dome shape. It looks like a later Baldwin, and it is, even though it's a wood burning boiler, not a coal boiler. Most people are running coal. You could order or some of those as replacements for engines that needed to be rebuilt. So it's possible that it could be a circa 1880 engine boiler. But of course, the engine is much older. And last but not least, aren't 19th century locomotives cool?
For sure.
Okay, so that was my thing there. And I just thought I would give you guys a little bit of education and what's going on behind the scenes, because this was a subject of a number of conversations, emails, whatever.
Right.
If you guys know who Jim Wilkie is,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but he's a pretty high level, pretty professional guy, and he doesn't like to answer too many emails, but he usually answers mine. So I was able to discuss this with him.
That's cool.
Okay, so let's stop the share, and you guys can get back to the things. I want to see what Charlie is doing.
Before
John,
we
did you have a
leave,
comment?
Yeah, I had one question, because I noticed in the early drawings, those are all spoked wheels on the lead wheels. And then the one you had, I mean, that later photo showed
The
them as
discs,
solid.
yeah.
And I don't know what that means, if that dates it or manufacturer or what that.
I don't think so. I think that was kind of a random order type of thing, which guys would order when they'd buy their engines. But I should have spent a little bit more time. I did tell you to look at the drivers. The driver spoke style is very similar to the Hinckley spoke style in that photograph too. And I forgot to mention that.
Okay.
Hey, Dave, I've got a
Cylinders that do it because
Wait, John?
Yeah, Dave, I've got a photo I want to show you.
Sure.
And yeah, first of all, congratulations. I'm glad I'm not the only crazy one. You see this engine here?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is another rebuilt 1850s Hinckley.
Wow.
And you notice it's got practically the same features. It's got the
Right. They cut the outside frame the same place.
They cut the outside frame the same place. They replaced the boiler. It's
Right.
got the same cylinder and steam chest. It's got the same round main rod.
Right. Yeah.
It always has looked very, very similar to the Florida engine to me.
Yep.
And just great job. I'm really happy you did this.
You have
I mean, people don't realize how much these things were rebuilt, because after all, engines were expensive, and the engine was considered to be the frame, the cylinders, and the wheels, and the boilers were throwaway items. When you need a new boiler, you got a new boiler, you put it in. General is on its 4th boiler.
Right.
Hey.
Hmm.
And you notice that dome there, that's the sand dome. That's like a Rogers sand dome, but the steam dome looks like one of these New England ones.
Yeah. This is a California engine.
What's the date?
The Sacramento Valley, and it got rebuilt by the Southern Pacific in the 1880s.
Yep. And they
Just
grabbed
parallel
whatever they
to-
had laying around.
Yep.
Do you have a
Is that
date for the
straight
photo?
boiler?
I'm sorry.
You have
that
a
is-
date for the photo?
Photos late 1800s. I don't really know much more than that.
Okay.
Is that a
Yeah,
straight
yeah, based
boiler?
on their clothes and stuff, I would say definitely, definitely post-Civil War without question. It's hard to date these things sometimes because there's very little change as far as dress and whatever, but
Yeah, this particular Hinckley was built in 1856.
yeah,
Originally, it's thought it looked a lot like the Ottawa that you just got through showing.
right.
Hmm.
Does look a lot like the Ottawa, although there's obviously differences, but you know, the basic concept, if you notice, is the same. And also the very small drivers. This has remarkably small drivers, which means it definitely was a freight engine.
Oh,
Freight engine as well. You know, their top speed of this engine probably no more than 40 miles an hour. So it probably ran about 15 miles an hour.
right. Gorgeous.
I think interesting, John.
So great, yeah.
I've looked at a lot of the stuff you put out, and I have to say it's good.
Good investigative research. Thank you, David. That was great.
Thank you.
Well
yes.
done. Appreciate
All
it.
righty.
Okay, Dr. Taylor?
Give me a sec. I'm gonna share screen. Ooh, baby. Desktop, right? Yeah, yeah.
Then go down to share. Same window.
For that.
No, no. Right
Good thing Will's there.
here.
I
IT, that's another part of the job.
go.
Yeah, it should be working now. Now go.
Yeah,
You're-
now go down
You're
here.
good, yeah.
Yeah,
And you can go to, yeah, spoiler alert. So go to, oh, you're good. You can go up here to slideshow.
gosh, that's the most painless.
And you go
Yeah.
play from start, yeah.
Oh, man.
So you can ask
All
whether
right.
to see it though.
All right. Really, I'm humbled to be around a lot of you guys. It's amazing what you know. And yeah, I feel like a hack up here in Memphis, but anyway, so here we go. All right. So as always, special thanks to my brother Harold. You know, I'm retired now, but being an orthopedic surgeon, I would not let myself get a table saw. And so Harold has done some of my fine cuts with wood, and certainly he helped me on these pontoon boats, but he helps me on everything else too. And special thanks to Tom and friends who have visited Memphis. This is Charlie Curro, the guy without hair, and he is my longtime medical illustrator. And for several years, I tricked him into helping on the railroad, but he's a full-time fisherman now. And that's young Will Shire in the back window. We'll see him. But
I
besides
guess you made that slide.
yeah, Will is an amazing muralist, but as good as he is with murals, he's also fantastic in 3D. And I would have spent my entire life trying to paint the first figure in the mural. So it's really, and that's the truth. That's the truth. It'd be easier to teach him to be an orthopedic surgeon than teach me to be an artist. This is just, so this mural is, it's almost 200 feet long. It's about 285 feet long. And you just, and Will doesn't even wear glasses.
I do now.
Oh, yes, okay. And I'm telling you, it reminds me of just the incredible work that some of y'all do, like John Ott, but he can get more accomplished in the bottom inch of a mural, and that just kind of marries the foreground with the background. This is the emergency spur the Yankees put in at Bridgeport. It's a 2 mile long spur and it brought supplies down to the Cracker Fleet, some small packet boats that they actually built on the Tennessee River to take supplies to the Yankees that were under siege at Chattanooga. But the two scenes that really hooked me into wanting to make a Civil War railroad, the first is the scene at Bridgeport, which has got the beautiful Howe trusses, you know, Tennessee River, and they're beginning to construct one of the pontoon bridges across the Tennessee River. And so I always had this in mind to build. We've been working on our layout for 10 years. And I'll get to that in a second. And this is that same bridge when they completed it, and they had taken the pontoon bridge down. At each end of this Howe truss are these beautiful queen post bridges. I just really fell in love with those, and we got two on our railroad. And the other scene, and I've talked about this in years gone by, is the trestle at Whiteside, Tennessee, over the running water creek, and it's spectacular. It's 110 feet high, 820 feet long. There are 2 million board feet of lumber in that emergency trestle, and you can see the Yankee engineers have basically stripped the mountainside, for the trees. And so, just in the few places I've mentioned already, it turns out that historically, these were the 5 principal bands of the Cherokee Indians. One was at Chickamauga Creek, the other Chattanooga Creek, the Running Water Creek, where we just saw the emergency trestle, Nickajack Cave, which becomes the second biggest gunpowder works or potassium nitrate works for the Confederates. And the other band was on Long Island, and that is an island in the middle of the Tennessee River, right there at Bridgeport. And so that Long Howe Truss Bridge went from Bridgeport, Alabama to Long Island, and then from Long Island to the Tennessee shore. So I just going back through some of my old photos. And so in 2012, I really didn't have the layout very well planned, first year or so. And so I've got a plywood bridge. You can kind of see where my pointer is. And so I built these plywood boxes with Will. And these were kind of placeholders for the Howe truss and the emergency trestle. And then I realized I need to make a switchback to get down, to get the pedestrians down to the lower level of the bridge. So this is the construction of the switchback. All right, so that's 2012. And then on the right is Will. He looks exactly the same 10 years later. He's putting some finishing touches on the road, the switchback road leading to the pedestrian deck of the Howe truss.
Wow.
And so straight under the end of the bridge is the landing that I had anticipated for the pontoon bridge. So that's 10 years ago. And, if my wife asked me to tighten the handle on the doorknob to the, bathroom, it takes me a couple of years just to find the screwdriver for that. So this isn't doing too bad. All right, so here was the landing that I anticipated 10 years ago. I used a laser to shoot the center line for the pontoon bridge to make it parallel to the Howe Truss Bridge. All right. Yeah. So this was just a month ago or 5 weeks ago. I started the bridge. I'd already made the boats, but that's something else. So I had to do a little bit of surgery. I had to carve back some of the foam, and for the usually they use wooden abutments. So I've got my abutment planted in my trough there, and I'm kind of anticipating these larger beams that are called balks. and we're going to talk about that. So I'm telling you, this is as interesting as it can be. I hope I can get some of y'all excited about it. But each Army unit in Civil War had between 2 and 4 pontoon trains per Army. All right, and so it's interesting, if there was one pontoon boat on one wagon, they actually called that a pontoon train. And if there were 70 wagons, they called that a pontoon train. So sometimes reading about it, it's hard to figure it out. But so there were 2 to 4 pontoon trains. Each train had 70 wagons. I mean, this thing would take hours to pass you if you're standing on the side of the road. It had more than 420 horses or mules. Wow. The flat bottom boats, you know, there was variation in them, and they were as short as 26 and as long as 32 feet. And typically they're about 5.5 feet wide at the gunnel, and they're about 2.5 feet high. That's all. And I found a hard source that these boats were painted blue. In fact, they're painted not sky blue, but yeah, aqua blue. All right. So the bridge consisted of these boats, and they put longitudinal timbers on them called balks. Sometimes you'll see it BAULKS, but they also this way too. And so each boat wagon carried the boat and 7 balks, 5 for the to provide the strength for the decking, and 2 that were curbs to keep the wagons from rolling off the top of the bridge. And so every wagon that carried a boat carried 7 of these timbers. And these things were 5 inches by 5 inches by 27 feet. 27 feet. I mean, that's as tall as a 2-story house. And you definitely can't go to Home Depot for one of those guys. So I'm pretty sure they must have painted that. I mean, that's some pretty sacred lumber. And so we painted them kind of fatigue green. And then the boards that the people walked across and the wagons rolled across were called chessboards. And we know the exact dimensions of these things. They're 13 feet long, 12 inches wide, 1.5 inches thick. And they were, each edge of each end was notched 3/4 inch to provide clearance for the ropes that were used to bind the bridges together. And then there were 2 timbers on the top. They're just like the lower balks, and they were lashed to the chessboards and the bottom balks with 1-inch rope. And so again, in a typical train, 70 wagons, 30 to 40 pontoon boat wagons. And these are special wagons with 15-foot wheelbase. And if they had 40 pontoon boat wagons, they would have 20 chessboard wagons. So one chessboard wagon had enough planks to address two boats. Then they had wagons with tools, traveling forges, and then this barraggio, Tom, you correct me being Italian, but it's actually Austrian, but a barraggio trestle wagon. We're going to talk about that. And then 1 or 2 wagons that carried some timbers that they might use as an abutment, to anchor the bridge at each end, and some tools to dig trenches.
Wow.
Sometimes it took longer to prepare the abutment than it did to put the bridge down. It just depended on the situation. There are a fair number of photos. You see pontoon boats being moved, and the wagon, it had 1 boat, 7 balks, and 6 horses or 6 mules. And they would not put anything else in the boat. You think we'll put a toothbrush in there or whatever, pack and play, but they wouldn't put anything else in there because the wagon was already heavy enough. That's kind of interesting. And then you see the guys with picks and axes who would put the abutments in. This is a great photo. I don't know when I found it, but it's, the whole pontoon train is kind of pulled over for the night or something. They pitch tents, so maybe it's longer than a night, but here they are. And again, these boats are 32 feet long, most of them.
Great photo.
And they varied significantly. And there are some really high resolution photos of these boats from the Rappahannock station. And hopefully Joel Sanders will chime in eventually on this thing. But, it really lit me to see that great photo he showed of, flat car after flat car after flat car with pontoon boats on them. And so we're going to talk more about that. So here's kind of a simple looking pontoon boat. This is kind of what I styled mine after. And so mine is the one on the right that's kind of ugly. And then on the left, they got, they curve the bows on these things. And they also are swept up on some of them. But every time you see one of these wagons, you'll see the bulks underneath. They also had canvas covered boats. So they had to haul the wooden frames around, they had to put the wooden frames together, and then they stretch a canvas over it that became relatively watertight when it got wet. And I think maybe the big advantage is they could maybe haul 2 of these on a wagon rather than just one. But I think they're a big hassle, and both of them leaked. Both type boats, they had to bail them constantly.
Yeah, and the trains were also different, pretty muchly depending on which engineer unit was running the train. There's a lot of customization.
Makes sense.
Right. And then, so this is that same great photo. It's probably not from 1864 because the house truss had been completely repaired by December 21st, 1863. And then the emergency trestle was finished like 21 days later. So January 14th, 64. So this is probably earlier than that. And it looks like they've just begun putting the pontoon bridge up. So this is the Tennessee River, and they use pilings for the first couple of levels where they needed to support the bridge. And then it turns into these weird things, these barrageo trestles that slope in toward each other. And so they would use these barrageo trestles until it got relatively deep, maybe to 3 or 4 feet. And then they would use the pontoon boats.
How do you drive those in the ground? Or,
So the piles were driven like piles, but these things were just kind of stuck in the mud for a foot or so.
okay.
And the platform could be raised or lowered, to match the water level if you had a river that was rising or falling, or you had a tidal river. And so it was good to use these barrageo trestles at 2 or 3 stations between the shore and the boats, so you could kind of match the deck height for the boats. And then in the Civil War Atlas, there are some drawings of this barrageo trestle, and this has been annotated to show the chessboards, the deck, the lower balks, the rail balks, and again, this barrageo trestle. Wow. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but can y'all see my arrow on?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a good schematic of, the boats are about 20 feet on centers. And then these balks would span the far gunwale of boat 1 and 2. Okay. And then, so they would overlap for almost 6 feet. And then the chest planks would be laid on that. And then the curbs laid on that, and everything bound up. All right, and I forget, Joel's probably gonna tell me what this is. I don't know that this is City Point. This might be somewhere else, but it just had a great photo really showing the barrageo trestle. You know, these first 2 levels of support right here show that trestle, and you can see the support chain where the deck can be raised or lowered.
Wow.
And it looks like, you know, this deck was covered with dirt. I don't know, for traction or anyway, it's kind of interesting.
It's to not scare the horses.
Did not scare the horses?
Yeah.
They wouldn't hear themselves walking or so bad.
Yeah, because it's an unstable surface to begin with, because they bounce. And you know, pontoons are bouncy things.
Right.
And so the dirt sort of muffled that, and the horses were not associating, because really the main thing you don't want to do is spook a horse on a narrow, bouncy bridge.
Right.
You know, and I'll show you some pictures in just a second. So these chessboards are 13 feet wide, and by the time you put the curbs on, you end up with about 9 feet between the curbs. And you think of these wagons, you know, they had about a 5 foot wheelbase, or width. There's not a lot of room. You know, if you had a horse buck or kind of go, he could take the whole thing over the side. So I'm sure it was kind of a lot of apprehension crossing these things. And some of these photos, you'll see these bridges just are like snakes. I mean, they wind across the river. This is on I think the James River, and the thing is straight as an arrow. And so there's always upstream anchors, and every several boats you would have a downstream anchor. And if it was a tidal river, it would flow both ways. Every single boat would be anchored both directions.
Wow. Wow.
All right. Now, if you didn't have a barrageo trestle, you can use what's called a saddle boat. And so they've taken these 5 extra beams where the balks would rest, and then that supports this kind of central beam, and use it, and then the balks rest on that. So in that way, you could have a boat supporting balks coming in slightly different planes. In general, that's a bad idea, because it'll damage the gunnel or sink the boat. So I mean, it needs to be evenly loaded.
Right.
So that's called a saddle boat. All right, so Brother Harold cut me I had the basswood, and anybody needs a source for basswood, contact me. This guy, no, I'm telling you, this guy up in the north, you give him some specs on what size you want, and I mean, it's to the 100th of an inch. It's beautiful stuff. Anyway, he sent me the wrong shipment one time. He said, just keep it, and I'll send you the right stuff. And so I kept it, and it was perfect for cutting up for these boats. And so I'll take a block of wood. I use the scroll saw and cut the profile. And rather than just a simple thwart going across the boat, I've got basically a bulkhead, if you will. And then these sides were sloped about 12 degrees. And so the first 4 boats I did actually with just a hand plane, just shooting it on the side like that. And it worked out great. And then I'd put the seats in, I glued the seats in, and I planked the sides so that you would see the individual planks when you painted this thing, make it look like a boat. So I planked the sides. And so these are the first 4 that I did. And then I started cutting a lot of chessboards. I had to make about 300. But no, serious.
I get it.
All right. And so I knew the boats were blue. And so I painted the only blue I could find with flat blue. And I realized, no, they had to put some linseed oil, or if they could put a gloss on it, they would have, because this is going to be in the water. So I ended up going with a satin gloss, which I think works pretty well. All right, so at the stage that these are just blocks of wood, I kind of laid the thing out and decided I wanted 10 boats, I had that little gravel bar I had to kind of straddle. And so that really kind of dictated the spacing out. And then, so I had a little pilot hole, 2 pilot holes in each boat. And then I transferred those holes to the train table. This, and yeah, I got several grandkids and they love this thing. And so these are their Confederate boats trying to interfere with the Yankees getting this bridge across. All right, so here are all 10 boats in place, and so I used just a .055, piano wire just to hold in place, lay this thing out. Now I've cut the boats on the scroll saw, and I cheated on these boats because and kept them solid in the middle where the planks are, because you're not going to be able to see that. And these things are hard enough to cut anyway. All right, so and so painted them blue, got the seats on, and now I'm putting the balks in place. And I cheated on the 3 central balks because you're never going to see them, and I just used a continuous piece. But on the inside and outside balks, they're actually staggered like the real deal.
Wow.
And then I started gluing the planks on, started the middle, so I'd have 2 glue centers. I mean, that took a few days to glue up because you had to wait a few minutes before you could put the next one in place. And so I've gone kind of as far as I can go without addressing the slope. There's a slight slope from the land down to the first boat. I had to cut some kind of special balks for that. In this photo, I have begun to put the curbs in place. I put in all the outside curbs on the near edge. And then so eventually this boat is going to be sewn together. And you may already know this company is called the Siren Ship Model Company. They make cannons. They may have some cannons for HO scale. They don't have anything perfect for O, but they actually make scale rope. And this stuff is beautiful. I mean, it's true. Man. It is true rope. It's not string or thread. And you cut the end of it, and it takes a while before it unravels. It's just beautiful stuff. And so I use that. And kind of like packing your parachute, you got to make sure you don't tangle your cord, because
right.
I actually sewed each edge of the bridge with a single rope.
Jeez.
It's 20 feet long. I ended up with 2.5 extra feet, or three extra feet. And so maybe I won't do the next one like that, but I did the first one. And so I'd put a couple stitches in, and then I'd clamp it with 2 clamps, because you don't want the thing to loosen up. You don't want to have to back up. All right, so this is kind of my parachute packing station. Occasionally, I had to use a curved needle to get underneath the chessboard and above the gunnel of the boat. But I was able to do it on every single one. So probably a dozen times on the whole bridge, I had to use a curved needle. Other times you could just kind of thread it carefully, but it worked. And again, double clamp, but it's just beautiful to see this rope binding the whole bridge. And so this is the next to last curb being glued in place. And you can see the little bent piano wires that I used to locate the boats on the table. All right, and then you can see the abutment over to the left. And so I really can't get any closer on the layout. And so I lifted this whole thing out. I used just these are actually little scrap pieces of nickel silver from some rail connectors. I don't know why I hung on to them, but I just used them kind of as a little spacer, and it worked out nicely for putting the. All right, so I took the whole bridge off the layout, and I put it on a jig that I had made that holds the boat, the bottom of the boat exactly in the same geometry with the abutment. So I just had the same height block on this. And so I got I'm gluing the last curve in place. And once I had that in place, I could finish the lashing on the near side, and then I flipped it around and did lashing on the far side. So at this point, I finished the lashing. After I finished the lashing, I took some glue and glued the lashing on the bottom in several places so it wouldn't unravel.
Nice.
All right, so this is the bridge in place. You know, it's kind of a long run for a short slide. I mean, it's so two-dimensional. You know, it isn't sticking up real big and whatnot, but it's pretty interesting. And here it is, kind of from water level.
Right.
Those are my grandson's Confederates coming in trying to shoot us. And this is the first units over the bridge.
Wow. That's great. Jeez. Man, Charlie.
All right. And yeah, I can't remember where I got these guys, but they look like
They look like Sash and Saber.
they look like Sash and Saber, but
I don't think they are.
somebody wanted a ton of money for every one of these things, and I followed them for years, and then I didn't follow them for about a year and a half, and he was having a fire sale, and I finally went back, and I got these gas for $2 a piece.
No.
Oh.
I'd have bought the entire Northern and Confederate Army if I could have, but so this is the 23rd Colored Regiment, and then I forgot who the guys are behind them, but just beautiful stuff.
Beautiful painting.
All right, so that's not the only pontoon bridge by any stretch around Chattanooga. So this is the pontoon bridge off the north part of the city, directly across it, you know, from so I don't know, I don't think we can see the shed in here, but so anyway, this is just beyond the shed and beyond the city. And here's the shore. You know, the famous photo that we're building a steamship over here, and the U.S. waterworks are over here. But this is the first bridge into the city to bring supplies. You know, this is the Cracker Line that opened up. All right.
Wow.
And so that's how it started, as a pontoon bridge. And later that becomes the military bridge to Chattanooga. And I mean, that's the structure. All right, so that's north of the city. That's, I think, Cameron Hill, and that's Lookout Mountain there.
Right.
And then the other fascinating thing about pontoon boats and pontoon bridges. So the Bridgeport pontoon bridge is off screen left. Okay, it's way over here.
Mm-hmm.
And the bridge I just showed you coming off the north of the city is right here.
Right.
And then, so the final battle for Chattanooga, Sherman fakes like he's going to Knoxville. And he kind of hides behind the mountains. And then also off the screen, unfortunately, is North Chickamauga Creek. Okay, it would be up here. And so I forget what day it was, you know, the 20th or something like that in November. Sherman sends a brigade. Okay, that's 4,000 men, 100 boats downriver. Okay, and so they float from the North Chickamauga Creek for 9 miles at night. Okay, and then, you know, they run the guns, the Confederate guns at Lookout Mountain, and then they end up at Brown's Ferry, and they capture the hills there, and they use those boats and other boats to construct a pontoon bridge at Brown's Ferry. 2 days later, Sherman launches 100 pontoon boats, you know, these loose, you know, they got oars or paddles or whatever, from North Chickamauga Creek, and they float down to just below South Chickamauga Creek, and they come ashore, and so there are 1,000 soldiers in there with the engineers, and they make a beachhead here. And then they're joined very shortly by another pontoon train on the North Shore. And they have a major pontoon bridge here to get Sherman's army across to attack. Initially, I think it's Goat Hill. You know, he attacked the wrong hill initially, and but later Missionary Ridge. And so it's all just kind of scary to think about. You know, hundreds of these are terrible boats. I mean, it's probably they're hard to steer. They probably, you know, even if you paddle them, you couldn't make them go any faster. You know, they're just tubs. And so this is a photo from some reenactors, and I think this is slightly smaller than full-size boat, but 4,000 men in 100 boats at night. I mean, what could go wrong? I mean, it's just real scary.
Wow.
It's kind of exciting. And so all that to say, I think there are a lot of pontoon boats that sank. They had to be resupplied. You know, those 100 boats at Brown's Ferry were probably just left there, you know, as the battle raged and they went forward. So I think that pontoon boats, and certainly with that photo of Joel Salmon's, they're fair game for train loads. And I knew that Dave Schneider was going to be on tonight's telecast, and I wanted to make a special train with some Schneider flat cars. So these things have never seen the light of day. And there's some reasons for that, but they're going to see the light of day tonight. So I took them out of the boxes. Most of them had to have the wheels gauged. You know, if they're, and if y'all have never done it, you know, it may not pertain to HO scale as much as O, but I mean, the wheels can be, you know, short or long, and you can adjust that. You just take these frames, they come apart beautifully. They come apart real fast. And if I take a wheel off, I'll clean the axles real well and put a drop of that nano lube oil in there. And so
Oh my.
I built a loading dock. This is close to Stevenson, Alabama. Again, with my Cypress. And I can just imagine that they shipped boats in there that had to be unloaded and put on other empty wagons and whatnot. And so these are the first 4 boats I made. They're not part of the bridge, but I wanted to build a train.
All right.
So almost everything you're seeing is Schneider Locomotive Works.
Cool.
Now, it's actually on a flat car. Would the box be with the boat, or they'd have a separate car to carry box and those other pieces?
The box underneath each boat.
Okay.
Okay.
When they, in the shot in Alexandria, all the chests and everything are loaded in the car, in the pontoons, because they're moving the whole train out of the arsenal.
Okay.
Well, I see him now. Okay.
Yeah, right. Awesome. It's funny. So you needed to build pontoons in order to get the flat cars going. That's great. Wow. Oh, that's looking good.
Nice job on the train. Really, I like that train a lot.
The telltales are also made with that rope.
Okay.
Yeah, what is that? What are those for?
If someone was standing on a car, the rope and facing the wrong direction, the rope would tell him to drop to his knees.
Oh,
Awesome.
All right, that's all we got.
Wow.
Bravo.
God, I had a couple
Oh,
of questions. Fabulous work, Charlie. I mean, the precision, as usual, is like off the charts. I mean, laser lights to figure out the lineup of it and the meticulousness of the scaling. Just superb. God, you could tell you're a surgeon, especially with all that weaving of that
Yeah.
rope.
The
That, that borderline's insanity, but that's good. That's why you're with us.
I'm primarily a grandfather, I tell you that.
Right.
I
Right.
was impressed by the stitches.
Yeah, Lord.
I
So,
can tell lots of practice, sir. Lots of practice.
right, right. It looks like you even kept one of your needles. I had a question though. For the lengths and the sizes, you had a few charts in the beginning. Was that all information that you had to piecemeal together, or did you find one source for all of that?
Yeah, right for the start out, the one of the best sources is engineers on the Rappahannock. All right, it's a 3-part series. It's a blog, and it's incredible. But if you search engineers on the Rappahannock, they and also on part 3 of that blog, they have an animation that shows you how they would build the bridge. And so the balks, the end of the balk had kind of a cleat. They would screw a 1x2 or something at the very end and about 6 inches in. And so they could hook the balk over the far gunnel of a boat and shove it out until it was 20 feet away, and then drop the other end and put the other 3 balks in place. And then they put the chessboards on. So they could span, a 200-foot river in a couple of hours. They would go across the Tennessee River at night. That's 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet. So they were pretty amazing. They're very amazing.
Was there any mention about how, I guess it was manpower, given how heavy they were, they probably hand lifted them onto the flat cars?
Oh, I think, I was talking so much, I didn't go over the numbers on that kind of info slide, but the boats weighed 1,250 pounds each. It took 20 men to lift one boat. And so, each guy, lifted about 50 pounds. And the balk, each balk weighed is either 125 or 150 pounds.
Wow.
All right. And then each chessboard weighed about 35 pounds. So they were hauling a lumberyard. And so it wasn't like they picked a couple of guys to, you're on the pontoon train tonight or something like that. These guys got extra pay. The lashers were paid extra, and some of the engineers responsible for putting the balks in and whatnot got paid extra. But there were a lot of men in the unit. I forgot the exact number, but it's hundreds, might even be 1,000.
Really? I thought I read one time it was like 85 men.
Yeah, I think it's more than that.
More than that.
Well, there's 70, there are 70 wagons. So, it takes a couple guys just to drive the wagon.
Right.
Then you got the engineers in charge of the abutment, and you got the lashers and whatnot. So it was an undertaking.
A small army.
And so Sherman, there in the couple of days before they marched on Chattanooga, I mean, he dispersed 4 complete pontoon trains just on the open water. He sent 2 down to Browns Ferry and 2 across at North Chickamauga Creek, heading for South Chickamauga Creek. I mean, so that's four complete pontoon trains. So, you know, he may have had he had to have extra trains to finish the bridge at Chickamauga. So he may have had 5 or 6 to begin with.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's so astounding is the level of production that was required. I mean, all of that logistics, it's really just fascinating.
One thing I've seen in both housing and also, I had an old knapsack that was Army surplus from the Civil War, and it was coated with tar or something like that to make it waterproof. Last I knew, how do you paint on tar? Or like, could you tar, especially if it's canvas, would you tar the inside and then paint the outside blue?
It wasn't treated with tar. It's just the wet canvas becomes watertight.
Well, the 54ths were Gupta rubber. They were rubberized canvas. So the boats would probably have been rubberized canvas, nasty brown.
Ah,
That's the ones with the iron frames on Rappahannock. That's, I believe, the New York 50. I'll have to check, so don't grab the number on that. But theirs were Gupta rubber boats.
Rubber boat. Okay.
Yeah, so they were early versions of LBRBs, which, if you are a U.S. Army infantryman, you know what I'm talking about. It's a little rubber boat.
so Joel,
I thought it was tar, maybe it was rubber. I didn't think I assume it would get crinkly the same way.
Yeah, you got to remember, Mr. Goodyear was vulcanizing rubber, and that was one of those luxury items you got from the Sutter.
Oh, right. So Joel, for those pontoons, if they rubberized them, you're saying, because when I had this guy laser cut.
I wasn't arguing with Charlie. I just said, I know that one had rubberized parts. That there's a lot. I said, every one of those engineer trains, if you've ever had a room full of engineers, you have a room full of opinions.
So the one train that I have, a buddy of mine laser cut these, and I didn't realize he was going to make them for canvas. I was wanting them just wood, but he made them canvas, and he made all these little packets of canvas and painted them like an off-white. They probably wouldn't have been. Oh, they might have been.
Charlie said his evidence showed they were canvas, and they were regular, but that high duct canvas that's reasonably waterproof.
Got it.
And that's probably quite correct. I said a lot of the pontoon units were state units, so their acquisition may have been a little different. The Army engineer, the Union Army, I believe at the beginning of the war only had like 2 trains, and they were in storage at the arsenals.
Got it. Right.
You know, it was like, so that's the whole thing with Civil War history, is that there is a lot of different solutions to problems, and your research, you find the solution for the problem in your area.
Right.
That there is not, I have become extremely hesitant in general comments because of that. But this unit over here, they built them this way.
Right.
And if you go to like Alexandria and you look at Halp's building these huge pontoons, he called them arcs. And there's a whole series of shots of those being built and launched. Photographs from Andrew Russell took a whole series of those. And they were essentially designed to do what Sherman did with his engineer boats. She used them as assault boats. Fredericksburg, they used them as assault boats at first Fredericksburg.
Right.
Some were used as an assault boat to get across
Right.
in the preliminary battle in the town.
Right.
Joe,
So-
which station was it? Which railroad station is that slide that you showed?
That is Alexandria.
It is Alexander.
In Alexandria, it's the old, it's the Old Dominion station. When it was finally torn down, it was.
Yeah.
owned by
They can't
Chesapeake.
hear us, so that's okay.
It was
You-
torn
Yeah.
down in the.
They can't hear us. I like my Hawaiian background.
Do you think those boats were coming into Alexandria, or they were
They
getting
were-
ready
they
to
were
head
being-
west?
To Alexandria to go down for the Battle of Fredericksburg.
Sure, okay.
That was the problem in logistics. The problem was Burnside had a perfectly good tactical plan, but logistics at that stage of the war, so he ordered the pontoons to be shipped, but they kind of got held up and they were interrupted. It was hard to get it was hard to organize all of the stuff that had to be transported. So they're actually in the station at Alexandria, sitting on the siding, and that's, I love it because that's the illustration of what happened in the battle when your logistics tail got slowed down.
Who ordered the wagons?
The wagons are overland. They go fast.
Oh, okay. And so were the boats built in Brian Kammerer's country, or where were the boats made?
I think those boats were probably in storage. They were the ones, the information I have, that's the Harper's Ferry arsenal train. The arsenals were where they were stored. You had several arsenals, it's a whole line of arsenals that existed. And old Fuss and Feathers was a pretty good logistician, and he had stockpiled a lot of stuff. If you study his operations in the Mexican-American War, he basically out logisticked the Mexican army in their own country. So he had a lot of stuff in storage. He parsimonious budgets and that. So we would acquire things and then they were stored. And so they had to get all this stuff wrapped out of storage. And then as the war went on, it became so much of a river in war, they started building. So I imagine there were lots of contracts. I haven't gone to the archives to dig out, because I imagine that that somewhere buried in the quartermaster records are going to be all these orders for boats, and they're going to different companies, and all the boat had to do was float. So you get all these little solutions. They're just slightly different.
Yeah.
That's why I said I wouldn't make any pronouncements. I know that the boats in Alexandria, I got a photograph. I know what they look like. I know what's in. Okay. Okay. All right. And I have to assume that Andrew Russell took that picture about when he said he took it in his book, because in all the copies of his plates that he gave people, he has about the same date on that. All right.
Cool.
So that's it. So Charlie's research is excellent. It's interesting because your boats are quartermaster if they're blue. Ordnance equipment's painted green so that the ordnance sergeant knows who owns it. Quartermaster equipment is painted blue so the quartermaster knows that's my wagon.
Oh.
So they were blue.
Oh,
I said
Wow.
you could have. It depends on who is supplying the paint for the boats.
Well,
So in other words, Joel's telling you, do not put his name to anything that you're
Yeah.
offering up as where the research came from.
no, I found the
No,
source. I found the source where
Yeah,
this guy is writing his wife, and he said, "In the boats, these boats are a beautiful blue."
and I do not disagree with that. I said the guy who I will say the boats that were ordnance were probably painted ordnance green, but those boats,
Wow.
they're being installed by the engineers who owe loyalty to probably quartermaster.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, I think they really
Wow.
kind of slow down under Meg's channels on the Union side. But like I said, every time you go out there, you find research and it tells you what that one thing is. Expanding it is always risky. You know, my next trip, I'm going to try to put together the hospital trains from out there. I know there are 5 of them.
Ooh.
Out to the Armory of Company, there are 5 hospital trains operating out there, moving wounded east.
Railroad trains?
Yes, railroad trains with hospital cars owned by the Sanitary Commission.
Wow, 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 wow.
They're
Okay.
chartered by the sanitary, which then tells you that there's probably no standard design. The
Right.
Sanitary Commission the Sanitary Commission's records are in the New York Public Library, which is where they were headquartered out of. So, anybody who's up in New York City will research those. But in their online collections, they have photographs of Sanitary Commission cars. And then go to them alike. There's passenger cars that have been modified.
Yeah, I've seen those diagrams. They're very cool. Yep. Yep. That'd be a nice one, a detail.
Yeah, and so, but you got all these trains that you can throw into your mix, Charlie.
Right.
All
Yeah,
these
that's the next one. Charlie, so what?
I know they had 2 hospital cars at City Point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Charlie, for next time, we'll schedule you for the hospital train that you're gonna do.
I'm sorry, Charlie, that may be too much like work.
That's great. That's great. Charlie, fantastic. Thank you so much, brother, for taking the time and sharing that with us. Well done. Well done. Well done.
Thanks, Dave Schneider, too.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you, David. That was a great presentation. Any comments or anything from anybody? Okay. Good to see you all, and I'll keep you posted as to what we do next. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet. And as always, if you have an idea that you would like to present or have a suggestion as to what we can either discuss or have a presentation on, please let us know. Okay. You all take care. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Do something fun, like model something.
Thank you, Tom. Take care.
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Joel. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
It's awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
John, good to see you.
Hey.
Bye, Bill.